The question is for me and my listener in Ray County is how much support is there for the Bill Holland resolution that will be discussed in a planning and a workshop meeting this Tuesday evening? How much support is there? I have on the phone Harold Fisher, who is a commissioner in Ray County. Harold Fisher, can you tell my listener what this provision is about that expands police powers in Ray County?
Yes, sir. Last month, this thing came up, and it was tabled because there's not enough support for it. I don't understand how everyone thinks it's going to pass. It's not going to pass, at least not with my vote. It gets into a form of zoning, and some folks in the north end of the county has a problem with some of their neighbors. But this is not the answer to their problem, is to put all these rules and regulations on everybody else. It was tabled last month, like I said, and I don't see it even making it to the agenda on the county commission. This next Tuesday night is our workshop. The following Tuesday will be the county commission meeting, but I don't think there's enough support for it to even make to the agenda to make it to the commission meeting.
Well, what is objectionable about this this nuisance proposal that has language that will give added police powers to county government? What exactly are you worried about in this language if it did come up for a vote before the whole commission?
Well, this thing is too broad. It gets into zoning, and of course the state legislature passed this bill some years ago, and it's very, very broad. And it's too broad for me. Now, if we've got an issue, we need to discuss that issue, but don't impose all of these rules on everyone else. But like I said earlier, I don't understand how this thing's got to this point, because it was tabled at the last month's meeting.
And you'd rather there not be a general, a kind of general inspection provision in the ordinance for the county. You'd rather there not be that kind of permissive power.
Well, that's very true. And if we've got a problem, we need to address that problem and don't put a broad rule in for everyone.
Are the members of the county commission, Harold Fisher, generally free market oriented, or are they kind of conservative and want to cover their bases? Because this measure would seem to let commission members deal with any problem that might come up. It gives them a lot of tools in their toolbox, you might say.
Well, this is true, but this is, like I said earlier, this is going absolutely too far. And I was under the impression we was going to sit down and discuss this thing, but we haven't even gotten a legal opinion on this yet. That's why I'm surprised that it's gone this far. And I hear everything on Facebook that commissioners are communists, Nazis, and all this. And, you know, I don't appreciate that, because I spent 24 years on the county commission, and we have some really, really good people on our county commission. And over the last 24 years, there's been good folks served. And I don't think any of those people would put any undue burden on the taxpayers of Ray County and the citizens of Ray County.
Well, listen, thank you, Harold Fisher, for chatting with my listener and me and giving us a report about the sentiment on the county commission.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. This is David Tulis. We've been chatting with Harold Fisher, who is a member of the Ray County Commission, and he says that there's no real support for a proposal by member Bill Holland, who has an economic planning background and formerly was involved in sales for Pfizer, the drug company, and has proposed a measure that adopts parts of state law in Tennessee Code Title 6 that gives, if it's adopted by a municipal organization like a county or a city, gives that body powers that it might not otherwise have. And Harold Fisher says that there are good people on the commission for Ray County, and that they're not likely to want to put burdens, governmental inspection, policing type burdens upon the people, because that's really what they are. and he is surprised that the measure is on before him again to hear about. And I think that's because people have heard about it and have read some of my reporting on it at Nooganomics.com, our chief sponsor, and so there's public consternation that this measure might end up on the agenda for a vote of the whole commission. So it seems like there's not a lot of support for it. There are nine members on the commission, and the resolution says that 2/3 have to approve of it. And here it is, a very rural and conservative county, and suspicious of anything that smacks of zoning. Again, zoning being where the corporation seizes authority to sort of manage and direct and dictate what is done on otherwise ostensibly private property. Well, this is David Tulis, and we are glad to hear that the prospects of this measure are not great. The meeting on Tuesday at Ray County Courthouse is a planning meeting for the main commission meeting the next week. And so I think in this meeting there'll be a discussion of what gets on the agenda, and there might even be some maybe lively debate about this resolution, which gives the county the means to prohibit, abate, suppress, prevent, and regulate all acts, practices, conduct, businesses, occupations, callings, trades, uses of property, and all other things whatsoever detrimental or liable to be detrimental to the health, morals, comfort, safety, convenience, or welfare of the inhabitants of the municipality, and exercise general police powers, and more. So that's the key language, I think, that is the cause of much alarm by people in Ray County. Well, this is David Tulis, and we're glad that you are tuning in to my program. We're here at 92.7 FM. We argue for local economy and the free market. And when there's something that smacks that's anti-free market, that's innocent use of private property perspective, well, we'll certainly declaim against it, which is to say we'll tell you about it, and in the telling of it, make it clear what it implies. Rather, there be a reduction of authority going to municipal corporations, state governments, and officials, rather less than more. We live in an age of decentralization, an age of devolution. It's been happening for 15 years already in many parts of the world, and large systems that are full of friction, resentment, that misgovern those in far parts of their empire or their jurisdiction, seeking to break away under the ideas of self-determination. That of course is what we want here in Chattanooga. We want self-determination. Can we determine our own future as a city? And I know we don't really identify ourselves as a people. The people in the Chattanooga area. You could say demographically there are people here. There's a population, and in some limited way there is among residents of Hamilton County and Chattanooga an identification with their city and their place. But I don't know that it's really great enough or strong enough to say that there's a coherence and that they cohere around an idea of themselves as a people. It doesn't quite exist in that way. It's not like tribal, in a tribal country where you have common ancestors and you're all related. That's in some small towns, perhaps you have that kind of kinship, but not here. We are a metropolitan area, and so we would like, but even though we recognize there's not that social connection, there is in many other respects, though. There is a religious affinity among many people here, tens of thousands of people in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, premised on the same worship of the same holy God. So there you can find a kind of identification. And if there is decentralization and a cracking up of large broken systems such as the United States, well, we just want to think ahead, right? We want to think in terms of what kind of positive ethic, what kind of positive argument can we make for being independent and having not just not the familiar misgovernment that we have from the federal Senate, the federal House, and the alphabet soup letters agency of the federal executive branch. We can have here finally our own free market economy. That's the ideal, and that from that prospect, that venue is what I review, whether it be Mayor Andy Burke's not taking part in the federal Senate campaign, or his making comments about net neutrality, joining the Mayors for Meaningful Net Neutrality Protections. Now, want to mention the idea of high-handedness. We have that in Ray County in Bill Holland's measure. But we also have that at the university. There's a group out of Knoxville called the Center for Bioethical Reform, CBR, the Center for Bioethical Reform, and it is noted around the country for showing people what they've chosen. Right? If you're pro-choice, what have you chosen in the way of destroying boys and girls? Because after all, you shouldn't shrink from looking at a mangled baby, right? If you believe in the right to choose, there's nothing about that moral right, so-called constitutional right, that you should be afraid of, or that you should flinch from, right, or from which you should flinch. There's nothing at all like that. And yet, at East Tennessee State University, there is widespread, high-handed condemnation of Christian people who are involved in CBR. And I'm hearing here from a newsletter that I received from Knoxville, from CBR Southeast, Fletcher's Corner. And Diana, a pre-med student, told us that the pressure to conform to leftist ideology is oppressive at East Tennessee State University. Her ethics professor makes fun of her intelligence and her blonde hair. Only leftist professors may disparage women as dumb blondes, we're told here. And what about pro-choice? The professor says a doctor shouldn't be allowed to let his beliefs interfere with his services. In other words, the woman in his class should be forced to perform abortions or lose her license. And how we are to wonder, is that possibly pro-choice? A women's studies teacher brought his class out to rant against the display of shredded babies, which is what CBR does. Very noisy and bright images of destroyed babies, boys and girls, as well as victims of the German concentration camps and other points in history where people have been dehumanized and shredded. And so this class came out. After class, a CBR volunteer, Bill Boyer, approached this teacher and asked when he thinks life begins. The man ignored the question and went straight to ad hominem. Of course, ad hominem is an attack on a person. You don't have the right to tell a woman what she can do with her body because you could never have a baby. Boyer, who is a volunteer, said, I was never a slave owner, so I may not speak against slavery. The professor explodes in rage at that comment. Just then, a local pastor's wife joins the discussion, and the professor launches in a cursing verbal assault toward her as well. So much for respecting women. Now, in one encounter on the steps of a building is a volunteer named Laurice Badour. And she says, holy fire and holy love overcame me. Righteous indignation, love and compassion flooded me. She's standing there amid a group of women, mostly women. And I took over a man's class. Yeah, this is the professor who came out with his class. To my own surprise, my mouth opened and I called out to the female students loudly, enough to overshadow his voice. Ladies, she said, I love you. You're being lied to by this professor, and you've been lied to by our culture. And so she then assails each lie one by one. She lists the risks of abortion to their bodies, their souls, and their relationships. I share testimonies of some post-abortive campus peers with whom she had connected. The female students became angry, loud, and mob-like. I love mobs, she says, but I called out for order and assured them that each one of their comments and questions would be addressed one student at a time. And so she says she became like a sweet little lamb. Several began to raise their hands, waiting their turn. The others listened. As God once closed the mouths of lions in the den where Daniel was thrown, she says, so he closed the mouths of the students and the accuser of the brethren, who was speaking through the mouth of their professor. After our time of questions and answers and comments, the class disbanded. Several of the students came down the steps and shared their personal stories and concerns with me. It was a victory for truth. And Jane Bullington, who used to be my neighbor when I was a graduate student in Knoxville, she and her husband were neighbors with their children. I was a renter in a house on Deary Street in Knoxville. She has a note here from a student named Noah, who has a comment on his Facebook page. He says, "We were actually able to hear what the other one had to say. My concerns were focused mostly on pro-life people not favoring programs that would make life easier for the born people and their apparent vilification of women who have made this tough decision." Jane, he's referring to Jane Bullington, Jane talked about the devaluation of human life, leading to increased violence and selfishness in our country. She also said, "We may want the same ends for born people, but have different strategies for arriving at that goal. Did we come to the same conclusion? Do I approve of CBR and its tactics? No on both counts," he says. "But I have made a friend and have a greater appreciation for civil discourse. I am guilty of abrasively engaging, speaking without listening. In fact, you can call me at 800-8949, 800-8949. Today was different and refreshing," Noah says. "So come talk to these folks rather than yell at them." And I even went back to get a picture of my new pro-life friend. That's from the CBR report, pro-life report, of an event at East Tennessee State University, ETSU, where the Christian perspective and the pro-life perspective is poisonously dealt with by the establishment and academia. LifesideNews.com is reporting that the U.S. Justice Department is going to be investigating Planned Parenthood and the sale of baby parts. This is publicized Thursday. It is time for public officials to finally hold Planned Parenthood abortion enterprise accountable under law. That's David Tulis from the Center for Medical Progress. Fox News broke the story on Thursday. It had obtained a copy of a letter from Justice Department Assistant Attorney General for Legislative Affairs Stephen Boyd to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. This is long-awaited good news. That's Abby Johnson, a former abortion advocate, and a Planned Parenthood former director who is now a pro-life activist. Planned Parenthood has actively participated in illegal activities, she says, selling the body parts of aborted babies in exchange for profit. They've lied to the very women they purport to fight for. I saw it firsthand when I worked for the abortion giant, and yet they still managed to obtain over $500 million a year in our tax dollars. The U.S. House Select Investigative Panel on Infant Lives made 15 criminal referrals, according to LifeSite News, against abortion companies, including Planned Parenthood, universities, and fetal tissue companies. Mayor Burke, of course, who supports abortion, as he would say, abortion rights, has signed on with other mayors in condemning the proposal. He is the 11th signatory, right next to the, right above the signature of Rahm Emanuel of Chicago. The group is Mayors for Meaningful Net Neutrality Protections, and the Mayor Burke says that the plan to end the Obama putting the finger on the scales program for the FCC is a threat to education, innovation, and economic growth. As community leaders, we recognize the direct and substantial benefits that broadband connectivity and access to a free and open internet have in our communities. This is, of course, the boiler. I found a juicy sentence in this missive, and it is the, let's see, where is it now? Yeah, okay, here it is. It's on the third page. While the commission's proposal appears content to let harms occur and trust the FCC to remedy those harms after the fact, some of our communities prefer local solutions to challenges facing our communities. Well, what we have with net neutrality is a control of the function of price, a prohibition, effectively, of price. Price is how things are allocated, and if you don't have a price set by the market, but if you have a price set by government, you cannot have more people being served. You cannot really have an open market and free access. Free access comes when people can buy, not have to pay for that which they don't need. And the people who are defending net neutrality are defending the abolition of price. Now, we have the abolition of price in many areas of the state-controlled economy already. We have that with the Federal Reserve System. We have that with many government programs that put a finger on the scale and say, okay, we're going to pay you this much. We think of Medicare and Medicaid. We have the government setting all kinds of prices, and through the insurance industry, which of course is complicit with big government. We have skyrocketing inflation, as they call it, in the medical sector, and that's because we don't have real pricing with third-party payments and fourth-party guarantors that the government. We don't have reasonable prices. We have huge inflation, shortages, and many damaged lives. So here in the internet sector, we have the same problem. And Ajit Pai, the FCC commissioner, is going to put an end to it. He's going to let the market again set prices and let you buy what you want and not pay for what you don't need. This is David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio.